I think you're wrong, or perhaps understood me incorrectly when you say that I believe that government is not doing enough. No, I categorically disagree with you there. I think that government is doing all it can right now with what it knows right now, with the resources at its disposal right now. In fact, I think government is doing pretty well right now under the circumstances. But my personal feeling is that there are some red flags that make me feel as though government may not have the grip that it should have on the lockdown situation. I'm happy to have that conversation straight after the news. And yes, I'm a big critic of the government, but I believe that I'm a constructive critic of the government, because I don't believe that government should ever be allowed to be complacent and feel that it's okay and that they are doing a great job. Government officials must always be on their toes. It's 9 o'clock, time for Eyewitness News.
This is Eyewitness News.
Good evening. I'm Nyakallo Tefu. Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize has announced that the number of coronavirus infections in the country has risen to 1,462. He made the announcement in Bloemfontein this evening. The number of deaths still stand at 5, with 2 deaths still unconfirmed. Minister Mkhize says many have also recovered.
Our number right now comes to close to 45. That we have who have recovered, but of course it's slow, because the numbers of those who are going to be recovered, you have to give them a minimum of 14 days, check them up, and then check the tests and check their symptoms.
Parliament's Health Committee has called on Minister Zweli Mkhize to investigate the lack of protective gear for health workers amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Committee Chairperson Sibongiseni Dlomo has expressed concern over the reported shortage and has called on government to do something urgently. Babalundens has more.
Unions representing the police, prison officials and health workers have slammed government for failing to provide adequate protection against COVID-19 infections. Thousands of workers, most of them essential, are at risk of contracting the virus as they go about their duties during the national lockdown. Health Committee Chairperson Dr. Sibongiseni Dlomo.
I'm saying it's too bad. I just heard specifically there were nurses who were raising this matter in KwaZulu-Natal, in particular King Edward Hospital.
Dlomo says he spoke to Minister Zweli Mkhize a few days ago, but the minister had no details about the shortage. He says there will be a follow-up discussion with the minister and department for an update on the matter. Babalondenze, Eyewitness News.
Minister in the Presidency, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, says some of the lockdown rules have been adjusted, including the tracking of cell phones to find people who may have been infected. She briefed the media on changes to the lockdown regulations.
One of the measures that is being taken is that to trace the cell phone numbers of people who are around you. Because if we're all here and we have our cell phones open, and we connect to the same mast, then they can check who was around you.
Turning to the sale of goods, she says spaza shops and informal vendors may operate as long as they have a permit.
Spaza shops were supposed to be open, but for some reason, some were asked to close. So we're just clarifying that all spaza shops should be opened.
The minister says funeral regulations have also been clarified, with immediate relatives only allowed to attend, along with those who were close to the deceased.
Or persons closely affiliated with the deceased, because sometimes people get very close and even closer than biological relatives.
Eskom says it's using the lockdown lull to carry out important short-term maintenance to their generation infrastructure. The power utility has experienced a significant reduction in demand for electricity, which has allowed the company to operate without the need to implement load shedding. The state-owned entity has suspended its wind-generated power and plans to take its Koeberg unit offline tomorrow at midnight. Eskom's CEO, Andre de Ruyter.
Fortunately, we have had to postpone our bigger maintenance program for the duration of the lockdown, but we've taken down double the normal amount of megawatts in order to do short-term maintenance. So I think we'll emerge from this lockdown period stronger and a more reliable power utility.
De Ruyter has assured the public that all units will return to service at short notice should the electricity demand increase. Gold is trading at $1,614.49 an ounce. The rand's at 18.46 to the US dollar, 22.83 to the pound, 20.02 to the euro. Brent crude's at $29.81 a barrel. A partly cloudy Friday in store for Gauteng with isolated showers and thunder showers. Joburg at a low of 11, peaking at 17. Pretoria 12 and 20. Vereeniging 11 and a high of 16 degrees. Cape Town's weather tomorrow, clear skies with a light southwesterly breeze, a low of 20 and a high of 32 degrees. The top story in Eyewitness News this hour, Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize has announced that the number of coronavirus infections in the country has risen to 1,462.
Eyewitness News, in touch, in tune, and independent. For the latest, log on to ewn.co.za or ewn.mobi.
For all you need to know about COVID-19,
stay tuned to 702. Aubrey Masango on 92.7 and 106 FM.
Streaming on 702.co.za.
The 702 app.
And DSTV channel 856.
5 minutes after 9 o'clock, it's the second hour of the show, and thank you very much for staying with us if you joined us in the first hour, and welcome to you if you've just joined us. This is 702 for the Curious. My name is Aubrey Masango. Had a great conversation in the first hour with Pumingo, a counseling psychologist, about just some of the weird things that may be going on in your mind since lockdown started. We are on the seventh day of lockdown, and you may be feeling a little estranged to yourself, and maybe thinking things that are not in line with what you consider to be normal as far as you're concerned. I mean, I had a guy call in, I think it was Swoo, who said, he speaks to different walls in his house in different accents. Hey? I'm really trying not to laugh. Wonder which wall has the Zulu accent. Sorry, I got to stop this. But hey, some light-hearted moments there. But the serious thing is that you need to be able to understand that once you are feeling dysfunctional, once you are feeling a certain sense of being able to function, you can't wake up, you can't take a shower, you can't do things that would be considered to be normal with regards to hygiene, for example, then you need to be concerned and you need to then ask for help. But the one thing that was said that I found very comforting was that let's all understand that we are in an abnormal situation, and some of these reactions are normal reactions to an abnormal situation. That was great comfort for me, because sometimes I feel so claustrophobic that I just want to sprint, man. I just want to run out of the house. Yeah? But I'm still taking my showers. 011-883-0702. I want to read you some of the messages that came through in the first hour. Mangwedi Kinder says, Yo, bra obs, I called my mom home, Willie Ring, Limpopo, and asked her about lockdown. And she says, I want a lockdown. But there's no lockdown here. But Basaya up and Afkadi Kiriban, buying jala and selling. Direct translation, people are just going up and down with wheelbarrows, buying booze and selling. Kids playing in the street. There's no lockdown here. And I asked that question earlier on to say, and these are my personal feelings, and I really would like you to engage with them if you want, but are you feeling as though the period is not what you thought it would be? And that does not necessarily mean that government does not have a grip on lockdown, because that may mean that your expectations of what lockdown should have been is not necessarily what reality is. Remember, lockdown is not, the current lockdown is not a state of emergency. It's really a precaution to try and stop the spread of COVID-19. We are not trying to put people into concentration camps. There's no martial law. But maybe some of us thought that that's what it might be. And our expectations in that regard were not met, and therefore we feel that government does not have a grip on lockdown. So I'd be interested to hear from you about what you are seeing versus your expectations. And maybe there are instances of government not having a handle over certain things. I am feeling a little bit unsettled by the changes in various regulations and protocols, but I'm also aware that the practical requirements on the ground are not always as neat as what we sit and say in boardrooms, and so we need to be flexible. I'm very aware of that. I'm very much aware of that. So, but I do feel a certain level of, I wonder what it means to have the Minister of Transport changing his measures 3 times. No, maybe not 3 times, maybe twice. That there's going to be 50% capacity. Taxis can take 50% or 70% with masks or without masks. And that story not being very, very clear, the changes around funeral arrangements and so forth. It's all understandable because we need to be flexible. But I do want to get your sense of whether or not you feel these are the required flexibilities of the practical requirements on the ground versus the decisions that are made at cabinet level in boardrooms and so forth? Or are you feeling that maybe some things are starting to be lost in the grip of control? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about that. But in this hour, I'm going to be speaking to various industry and government officials to find out about various areas in which they are operating in our attempt as a country, as the globe, to try and stop the movement or the spread of coronavirus. And we'll be speaking to Dr. Kemi Chetty, CEO of the National Health Laboratory Service, talking about those mobile clinics that have now been deployed for screening and testing in various communities when I come back.
Azania Musaka, weekday afternoons, 1 till 3.
Zwelinzima Vavi tested positive for COVID-19. Did you have a fever? Was there a cough? Was there sneezing? What kind of symptoms?
I think on Saturday I had a light cough, nothing like a respiratory problem. There was a little bit of sweating like associated with flu at night, but of course I was feeling tired.
Azania Musaka on 702. For the curious.
In support of South Africa's primary healthcare efforts in the battle against COVID-19, Telkom has donated 15 million rands to the Red Cross and the Department of Health. You can also support by donating using your credit or debit card at pledge.telkom.co.za or by SMS from any network. SMS donate to 36757 to donate 5 rand, 38771 to donate 10 rand, and 40773 to donate 20 rand. For more details on how to donate practical items or via EFT, go to pledge.telkom.co.za.
Investec Asset Management has a new name, 91. It was the year we launched, a time of transformative change, which taught us that active investing could be a force for good. We're changing our name, but not who we are. We're the same people with the same passion for our clients. The times that made us, named us. 91. Investing for a world of change. Visit 91.com to learn more. 91 is an authorized FSP.
What you need to know about the coronavirus
On the 702 app
on 702.co.za
and on 702.
13 minutes after 9 o'clock, Dr. Kami Chetty is my guest, CEO of the National Health Laboratory Service. Dr. Chetty, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Aubrey, for inviting me.
So we saw on various media platforms, on Twitter, on various television programs, all of those mobile clinics coming out, those vans. It just filled me with all sorts of pride to know that we are responding in this way so quickly. Tell us a little bit about where these mobile clinics are coming from. What was the thinking, and where are they going to be deployed to achieve what?
Thank you, Aubrey. So the National Health Laboratory Service is responsible for providing laboratory and diagnostic services to the public sector. It's a Section 3A public entity, and the National Institute for Communicable Diseases is a division within the NHLS. So as part of our campaign against COVID-19, we have recently procured about 60 mobile vehicles that we're converting into mobile laboratories. And this is in addition to the 7 mobile units we already have. So that makes it 67 altogether. The idea about the mobile laboratories is from the call from the President as well as the Minister of Health in order to scale up our community screening and testing. It's also a call that was made by the DG of the WHO, who also spoke about testing, because laboratory testing is the cornerstone of being able to stop this epidemic. Because more people that we find who are positive, we'll be able to respond immediately and get them isolated and be able to follow up on contact. So the idea around the mobile laboratories is for us to distribute it to every district and every metro in the country. We're going to do this during the month of April. We've got a schedule of the number of vehicles that will be deployed at any time. And you're quite right when you said that we have procured it at an extremely fast rate. Normally, the vehicles will take about 10 to 12 weeks to be procured and converted. We've been working overtime to get these vehicles procured, branded, and equipped. So we've got 7 in the field. We're getting another 5 that's going to go out tomorrow. On Monday, there'll be another 12 that will go out. And we've got a whole program that during the next 2 weeks, we will be distributing those vehicles throughout the country. The vehicles have 2 forms. One is what we call a mobile testing laboratory, where it will be a fully equipped, but not a fully equipped laboratory, a laboratory with equipment. There will be a computer, a scanner, a printer, Wi-Fi, a fridge which will go up to minus 30 degrees, a generator, a wash basin, hot water, and the testing laboratory would have a gene expert instrument, which will, and I'll come to that. The other type that we've got is what's called a mobile screening and sampling laboratory, where it basically acts as a depot where samples such as swabs or blood collection can be taken, and this is done in privacy. We then store those samples in a fridge, and we would then take it to a laboratory to be tested. Now, and that's why I'm saying it's active depot. It's what we practice now, and but it takes the services closer to the people.
Yes.
Remember that people are sick. People also don't want to go to hospitals and facilities. So in this way, we take in the services to the people so that some.
Before it is time. produce an immune response is being trialled, as well as a number of revolutionary platforms, which include using the viral genetic sequence. This new class of vaccines are
much more innovative and frankly untested approaches that are inducing like a stronger response probably in the immune system, or I should say just a broader response. So they're really different recipes effectively for vaccines.
These untested vaccines have never been licensed for use on humans, so not only is COVID-19 unknown, so is some of the vaccine platforms that are being trialled. But if they get through all phases of the human trials, then they'll be looking for a license.
Part 3. Putting a person on Mars.
We've got just under 70 people or so working directly on the production of the vaccine.
That's Dr. Robert Grenfell. He's the Director of Health and Biosecurity for Australia's National Science Agency. His lab is used to working on infectious diseases. It developed vaccines for Zika and Ebola. Now it's COVID-19. It's his scientists we heard from at the start of the programme who were wearing spacesuits for their own protection.
This is definitely what the laboratory and the scientists have been trained for. So whilst all of them are reaching considerable stages of exhaustion, we are certainly being driven by this is what we've been trained to do, and this is a problem that we actually need to solve.
They've partnered with teams abroad for the human trials, should they get through the preclinicals. And then any potential vaccine, once it's got through all that, needs a license from the regulators.
I'm a solid supporter for a robust regulation system because medical histories has a history of many failed therapeutics and some that have actually caused a great degree of harm to people, or unintended harm, but certainly harm in that setting. So the regulators themselves are looking for safety and safety profiles, and they're also looking for efficacy, that is, that it actually does what it's supposed to do.
But given the exceptional nature of the coronavirus, he thinks this will be speeded through.
That degree of scrutiny will be streamlined in the presence of a pandemic. It's something that usually takes years. So it's we are in different times, and we are finding that everybody is trying to assist in making sure this process works as fast as possible.
Just so people around the world understand, is this a regulator for each country or is it an international regulator? So if it's approved in Australia, then it's approved globally?
Yeah, look, this is the interesting thing about pandemics. There is a charter that through the WHO that during a pandemic there is some harmonisation of regulation, particularly for pandemic vaccines. So generally an approach will be made in a signatory country that can then in fact actually be given WHO approval for use. And then other countries will have to accept, do I ask for scrutiny of the data myself, or do I accept what the WHO has given approval?
Has that pandemic charter been used before for vaccine?
Well, I understand that the swine flu pandemic, they actually did use this with regards to the approval of the vaccine, but certain countries actually did look at having a rapid review of that data themselves before they did the final approval. But that's the last time we had a pandemic and approval of a vaccine in a global fashion.
He understands the public is willing a vaccine, but cautions there's a reason why they take so long to produce.
Because it's a very, very complex process, and I've used the analogy of trying to put a person on Mars at the level of the science that we're trying to do here. The speed that we're getting to here has not been seen before. We generally say from beginning to end to get a vaccine from a new agent through can take up to 10 to 20 years. So this is in fact actually very, very fast, and if we can get this out in 18 months, that'll be an absolute record. If we can get it out less than that, that'll be absolutely fantastic because of all the lives that we actually save.
There's a lot of pressure, isn't there, politically, citizens wanting to know when they'll get a vaccine. You say 18 months would be a record. Does the speed concern you?
The speed would concern me if we were to jeopardise the approach to attention to safety and quality through the scientific process.
for about 10 years.
Our final expert witness is Dermot MacDonald. He's a lead organiser of Just Treatment.
We're a patient-led campaigning organisation looking to ensure that particularly patients on the NHS aren't harmed by the impact of high drug prices.
He's not been taken by surprise by COVID-19.
I think everybody's maybe alarmed and astounded at the scale of impact that the coronavirus is having. But we've had coronavirus pandemics or epidemics before, like in 2002 with SARS and with MERS in 2012. So we kind of knew it was coming. We just didn't maybe know when it was coming or what the exact mutation of the virus would look like.
He says that back in 2002, after SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is another coronavirus, there was significant investment to develop potential vaccine candidates. Dr. Peter Hurtes, the co-director at Texas Children's Hospital Center for Vaccine Development, was one of those looking into it.
He gave evidence in Congress very early this month about research. His team had developed a vaccine for SARS-1 with public funds that looked like it was a really promising candidate.
However, when it came to getting funding for the later stage human trials,
the money dried up, and that's normally where we expect to see investment from the industry.
So pharmaceuticals normally pay for the expensive clinical trials. They gain the patent and make money when they sell it back to the public. So why didn't they invest in a SARS vaccine?
In his evidence to Congress, in the end, industry is not interested in investing in a vaccine which they would have to stockpile. No one wants to invest in a product designed not to be used.
Stockpile? Because SARS was no longer such a threat. There'd been no reported cases after 2004, meaning there'd be no money to be made. So given that SARS shares a similar genetic code to COVID-19, we'll never know that if the SARS vaccine had been developed, whether it would have helped us get a quicker one for COVID-19. And then Dermot MacDonald says there's one final big hurdle. He says there's no guarantee that the vaccine that comes out at the end will be either affordable or available to everyone in the world who needs it.
We also have to think about the time lag it will take for us to manufacture all of the vaccines that we need. There are really only 4 big vaccine manufacturers left in the world, and they dominate the market. So the production capacity that's required for us to develop, once we find a vaccine that works, developing that to the numbers that we'll need to start rolling it out at an effective levels is going to take a long time for that production to get into the levels that are needed.
Yet in a pandemic like this, with all the political might behind a vaccine, production will hopefully be speeded up. Johnson & Johnson is developing a vaccine with the US Health Department. It says it hopes to make more than 1 billion doses of an affordable vaccine on a non-for-profit basis for emergency pandemic use around the world. Why does it take so long to get a vaccine? There's a good reason. It normally takes 10 years to make one for a new pathogen. The new vaccine needs to go through a preclinical phase and be tested on animals before it jumps through human trials on thousands of volunteers for safety and effectiveness. Then the regulators need to be satisfied, and finally, it needs to be manufactured at a huge scale. Experts say it could take around 18 months to make a jab against COVID-19, which may sound a long time, but if scientists manage it, it'll be the quickest vaccine ever to have come to market globally.
This edition of The Inquiry was presented by Kavita Puri and produced in London by Bob Howard.
You're listening to the BBC World Service, keeping you up to date and informed.
We still don't know how long this COVID-19 fight will continue.
Right now, life is changing for all of us around the globe.
Challenging times are ahead.
Don't drop your guard.
Here at the BBC World Service, we're bringing you regular roundups on the spread and implications of the coronavirus. Medical staff will need about 89 million medical masks and 76 million gloves each month. We have all the latest medical information, news of work towards a treatment, and reports from the affected areas.
I think that there is an enormous feeling in our country that we want to do the right thing.
The global effects on health, business, sport and travel.
The priority of our government is the health and well-being of our people.
Here on the BBC World Service.
You're with the BBC World Service on today's Science in Action. With 1 million cases of coronavirus around the world, twice what we reported a week ago, we're looking at the situation in Nigeria, where at least the virus hasn't yet reached the slums.
If it gets into the slum, the usual physical distancing and social distancing becomes a joke. It just can't happen. That's what I call the nightmare scenario.
The nightmare of COVID after the latest news.
BBC News with Julie Canberra. More than 50,000 people worldwide have now died as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. The figure of confirmed cases has also continued to grow, reaching almost 1 million. The United States, where there are more than 220,000 confirmed cases and more than 5,000 deaths, has now become the epicentre of the pandemic. The number dead in Italy is now nearly 14,000. The main crematorium in the Italian city of Milan has closed its doors until the end of the month to deal with the backlog of coronavirus victims. More than 2,000 Milanese died of the disease last month. In France, a warehouse at the main Paris food market complex has been requisitioned as a mortuary. There's been a huge increase in the number of unemployment claims in the United States in the past week because of the impact of the coronavirus outbreak. Last week saw 6.6 million applications, more than double the previous week. NATO foreign ministers have asked the alliance's supreme military commander to help member states tackle the coronavirus pandemic. But the Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg stressed that NATO's traditional business is still being done, saying its responsibility was to ensure that the health crisis did not become a security crisis. Global oil prices have surged after President Trump said he expected Saudi Arabia and Russia to end a feud that has driven the price of crude to 18-year lows. Mr. Trump said he expected and hoped that the two countries would agree to cut supply by at least 10 million barrels. The chief executive of the video conferencing app Zoom has apologized for security and privacy issues following criticism from its users. Eric Yuan said the platform's usage had ballooned overnight, and despite working around the clock to support demand, the service had fallen short. BBC News.
1 million cases. COVID-19 is bringing the brutal truth of exponential growth to our very doorsteps. Science in Action aired last week on the BBC World Service as the case count passed 500,000. The week before, it was 250,000. This time next week, I remember being sickened when the death toll reached 3,000 just a month ago at the start of March. It's only 2 weeks since the count reached 10,000, and now we're past 5 times that toll. 100,000 is just around the corner. I'm Roland Pease, and yet again we're focused entirely on the spread of the new coronavirus. We're looking at digital tracking of the disease in New York City.
We want to know how you feel and if you feel well, or if you had symptoms the day before, if your symptoms have changed. And this helps us to pinpoint hotspots and to track the spread of COVID-19 across the city.
A paper-based test, and we'll explore the millions of known chemicals for the handful that may destroy the virus.
We have assembled a data set with more than 50,000 small molecules from our collections that we can offer for free to the scientific community if they are doing research related to COVID-19.
Let's start, though, in Africa, which so far has been spared the worst of COVID's ravages, but where health experts fear populations will, in the long run, be hit the worst. It's a month since we spoke to microbiologist Shade Ogunsola in Lagos, who is part of Nigeria's coronavirus response programme. from lockdown in her home. She told me cases are growing in the country, but not yet because of person-to-person transmission.
So far, most of the contacts or most of our cases are still linked to imported cases. We don't have much of a community transmission going on yet.
What makes you so certain of that?
For example, Lagos has the highest number of cases. 70% of those cases are men. The general age bracket is between 30 and 39 years. 16% of them are foreign nationals and 84% are Nigerian. We actually have a good tracking system. If you remember, our first case was imported, a businessman from Italy. 16% of the cases that we have were contacted from the imported cases, and it's only 2% that we don't really know. We're not sure how they got this.
You must be concerned, though, that as you're seeing more imported cases, that some may be slipping under the radar, particularly as asymptomatic carriers seem to be part of the problem. Are you able to track the contacts of these people? Are you able to check up if there are maybe other people who haven't reported yet who may be transmitting the virus?
Well, we've been tracking countrywide. We've contacted over 6,000 people around these people that travel. We monitor the suspects. So you phone them, like with Ebola, you phone in those on self-isolation. I hope you're doing it. What's your temperature today? We're doing that. And it's a lot of follow-up. It's also being done digitally. I mean, we have a tracking system for all these people. Now, one of the reasons we have the lockdown is to keep people in place so that we continue to track. And we know that there will be some that we didn't know about, so that they start to come out. And we're hoping that will reduce transmission. Our nightmare scenario, that it goes into the slum, then we will have. So far, we doesn't seem to have done that. We'll know in the next few weeks. However, we also know that this is 4 weeks. And so compared to other countries who reached the exponential phase in the first 3 to 4 weeks, we haven't reached it yet.
Which seems to be the telltale sign, because the number of passengers, number of travellers doesn't grow exponentially. The number of spreading cases does.
Yes. So I think part of why this is this way is, again, almost like the Ebola story. It came in through the elite. They tend to live in their own homes. Many of them are less likely to move around. They're more likely to listen to self-isolate. They move in more rarefied groups. So that's why we think if it's in that group, we'll be better off. However, they also have people who work with, and so we're hoping it hasn't moved down the socioeconomic ladder, but that is Lagos. We're beginning to see more cases outside Lagos and Abuja. Abuja is the capital, and there are the two hotspots, but we're beginning to see in other places. And how those places fare instead of how Nigeria will fare, we're watching.
And you say that the nightmare for you is if it gets into the slums, and I presume that's because in the slums, because of crowding and because of the lack of water, difficulty of hygiene, this will be much harder to control. It may spread in a very different way. Are there any lessons from elsewhere in the world that you've seen that will help you at least manage that?
If it gets into the slum, the issue of physical distancing and social distancing becomes a joke. It just can't happen. This is not the country's fault, but I'm thinking through what happened during the Ebola, I think in Liberia. Whole communities had to be cordoned off. That's what I call the nightmare scenario, because you will have to hold them in, because it will be almost like the cruise ship scenario. People are in there, and this is personal, and this is part of the conversation that is happening. How do you handle that? And some of the questions are, what's the place of everybody using masks in terms of self-control? Everybody in that sort of community. Do we go in and do you seal off a whole area? Because that's really what would happen, which happened during Ebola. And then you go in and test people. The full details, I don't know yet. I'm not even sure we've totally addressed all that. You know, it's almost going to be like a Wuhan, hold everybody in, because if they come out, then it really becomes uncontrollable and unmanageable. But it has to be done with a human face.
Sade Ogunsola, Professor of Microbiology at the University of Lagos. While Sade and her colleagues nervously await the foreseeable tsunami of COVID cases, New York State in America has already been overwhelmed. With over 80,000 cases, the single state has overtaken the whole of China in terms of the virus burden. Governor Andrew Cuomo says the peak won't be reached till the end of the month.
Everyone asks the same questions, and they're all good questions. When is this going to be over? What happens? How does it end? We have a model. We have a projection. What we're looking at now is the apex, top of the curve, roughly at the end of April, which means another month of this. The apex, the recent number is you could need 110,000 beds for COVID people, 37,000 ventilators. That is our current model. That model is based on minimal impact from social distancing.
Social or physical distancing is, of course, the aim of the lockdown policies. Reduce the number of contacts between people, some of whom may be infectious, to stop the spread. In China and in South Korea, distancing was enforced, or at least encouraged, using phone apps that would track potential contacts. A study from Oxford University this week said it does help. In the heart of New York City at Mount Sinai Medical Center, they have launched another app with the aim of reducing the caseload there. Girish Nadkarni is one of the developers. Girish, before we talk about the app, you really are at the center of the storm there, aren't you?
Yes, we are absolutely at the epicenter of this public health crisis that's taken the US by storm. New York has almost 50% of cases happening in the US and maybe like 5% of cases in the world. So we are seeing a massive number of patients with COVID-19 being admitted to both the general medicine wards as well as the ICUs. So much so that Mount Sinai is now building new hospital capacity in Central Park as well as other places like the lobby, which normally would not have been used for patient care.
You're involved, though, also in the development of this app, which is, you better describe how it's supposed to work.
Because we are living in a pandemic, it's kind of important to understand how COVID-19 is spreading and what the disease course is. I mean, if you have symptoms, how do you get sick? If you get sick, you need to come to the hospital. If you come to the hospital, what are your outcomes? And most of the information has come from either Europe or China, but it might not be transferable to America. The second issue is most of the information that we have comes from people who are in the hospital and who are tested for COVID in the hospital, but that's not the full picture because there's a large number of people living in our community who may or may not have symptoms but may never come to the hospital. So this app has two parts. It has a one-time survey that asks about the state of your general health, things like your age, whether you have any lung issues, whether you smoke or not. This helps us better understand who's at highest risk of disease. And then we have a daily survey that tracks your symptoms. We want to know how you feel and if you feel well, or if you had symptoms the day before, if your symptoms have changed. And this helps us to pinpoint hotspots within the city and track the spread of COVID-19 across the city.
So it's a kind of, at one level, a kind of self-help app, is it? People typing in their symptoms like, I've got a slight cough or I have a runny nose or something like that. You might flag up as someone who might be potentially interested. I mean, if there are a lot of people in those streets, you might think there's something going on there.
Yeah, we do it by zip code, so we at least know which blocks or which zip codes may have a high number of self-reported symptoms.
What about contact tracing? That was the thing that seemed to do the work in South Korea and in China. Is it something that it would be easy to graft onto your app? And, do you have any thoughts or concerns about doing it?
Well, in South Korea and China, contact tracing was used in conjunction with massive testing, right, of the population. A lot of the population got tested, so once you had a positive test, you could trace contacts. Right now in New York, and hopefully this will change within the next few days, people in the community are not being tested on as large a scale as people in South Korea and China were. You see what I mean? So if the testing ramps up, then maybe it would be of utility in the future, and it could be potentially an avenue that we could take, but we're not there yet in terms of testing the whole population.
But if your app were to find, let's say, a cluster of cases in some particular zip code, would it make sense then to send out the people to collect the samples from a large proportion of people in that area?
That could actually be done, and that's why we are planning to reach out to the Department of Health to see if they want to coordinate efforts on this, and hope it will start ramping up quickly.
Are you at all frustrated that New York wasn't even one of the first places where COVID took off within the United States? Have you been frustrated at the slowness of the public health effort to try and squeeze down on the spread? Do you think it's not too late for public health efforts to make a difference in how this plays out in the next few weeks?
Well, I'm not frustrated with the response. More could be done and more has to be done, because this is a constantly evolving situation and our response needs to evolve with this virus. Dr. Fauci said, right, you don't set the timeline, the virus sets the timeline. I don't think public health measures are ever too late. Initially, you go into prevention, then mitigation, and then aftermath. So I think public health and in general health measures can be applied throughout the whole spectrum of the disease. So it's never too late to, give it your all.
Your career started in Mumbai, I think, is that right, in India?
It did.
What do you think of the idea of rolling something like this out in India? Is this something that you think that would help them when they're on in the early stages of this COVID crisis?
I think that would absolutely help. That's a great idea. We've been so preoccupied and so laser focused on getting this out, we haven't even been thinking about that. But I think that would be a good idea, because Mumbai has approximately twice the number of people as New York, right? If you count the whole city of Mumbai, and all of them are at home, an app like this would definitely help monitor outbreaks of the disease, particularly in densely populated areas of Mumbai. But it would also help the government plan for a healthcare response. So, this could very well work in India. Now you've actually given me an idea. I'm going to reach out to my friends in Mumbai and see if they want to collaborate on this.
Dearest Ned Carney, if we do even a little to help here on Science in Action, I'd be so glad to do so. Self-reporting apps to identify COVID hotspots is one approach, but carriers also self-report unwittingly in another way, when they go to the toilet. Virus, it's known, will get flushed away with the rest of the waste, and that has led Cranfield University's Shugen Yang to propose another way to identify hotspots by testing the wastewater in sewers. A similar approach has been taken to identifying illegal drug use in the community. What Shugen proposes doesn't need complex technical equipment, just a test kit printed onto a sheet of paper.
This device is manufactured by the office printer, but with wax as the ink. The paper is used from the chromatography paper, so we generate these microfluidic channels by a wax printer, and then we can manipulate the water samples or other clinical samples by folding and unfolding in steps to filter the nucleic acid of pathogens from the wastewater samples. Then we use a biochemical reaction to apply the very low concentration of nucleic acid, then to be detected with the dye, even by the naked eyes. It's very cheap and easy to use.
How would this device work in this COVID setting? Is it that you would want to use it for individual patients, or is it that actually you can do some kind of community sampling?
My main purpose is to do the community sampling, because to deal with this clinical virus, there's some limitation, especially without the clinical approved laboratories with P3 levels. So for my recent interest is try to test the wastewater rather than to test the individual blood samples. by doing this, we can predict the infections in these communities because all the wastewater can contain biomarkers such as virus in the fecal or urine. They are present the alive coronavirus. All this coronavirus goes into the toilet and eventually end up in the wastewater. If we can diagnose, directly test this wastewater rather than to do the individual test kits, which is very expensive and now it's a very limited resource. So then we can simply assess if there's any people who are infected in this community, in this population level, rather than the individual level. So we can distinguish between each community rather than to do all the isolation or self-quarantining at home.
You've been talking very much about using this with wastewater and so on, but in principle, I presume you could use this with samples either from a patient's mouth or from a blood sample, something like that?
Definitely. Actually, if we test the clinical samples like blood or swab, it's even easier. It's nucleic acid-based assay. It's a molecular method. We have some previous data which is showing that by testing the malaria nucleic acid and compared with the gold standard polymerase chain reaction PCR method, the sensitivity and the specificity are even better than that one.
So, I mean, are there any downsides with this approach, either in terms of the meaningfulness of the results or even just in terms of whether the authorities would sort of give you the go-ahead?
Because of the limitation of this access of the medical samples as a virus, so we need P3 labs. It's difficult to use and further develop to test the real clinical samples.
When you say P3 labs, this is a sort of safety level that you need. Is there a safety issue with a piece of paper that may have viable virus on it? Are there any safety issues with using this if it is with a particularly infectious virus?
For the paper device itself, there is no risk. So I'm just talking about the safety grade of the processes virus samples. So they need to be in the very strictly or high equipped laboratory. So we can develop this technology, but we can't have access of these virus samples. So that's the limitation.
Shugen Yang. And so, back to where we began, the ever-growing numbers of COVID patients. Surveillance may help identify the newly infected and slow the spread, but once they are in hospital, it's treatments that the patients need. And at the moment, there are none known to be effective against the coronavirus. As we've discussed previously here on Science in Action, specific antivirals were developed after the related SARS outbreak of 2003, but they are still lab-bench dreams, not tested therapies. But the World Health Organization is coordinating a global set of trials of drugs already in use for other diseases and which show some promise. A team of the American Chemical Society's Chemical Abstract Service has an overview of all the compounds that have antiviral and medicinal value, and they drew up their own list, including those being tried by the WHO, such as remdesivir. Here's Angela Joe.
Remdesivir is a broad-spectrum antiviral drug candidate. It was primarily developed for Ebola virus infection. However, during their development process, this drug actually also showed some interesting results of inhibiting SARS-CoV virus and MERS-CoV virus. These two viruses are both beta coronaviruses that cause the severe acute respiratory syndromes.
It's a drug that's supposed to stop the virus replicating its RNA, which is part of its essential life cycle. Is that right?
Yes, so the remdesivir works by inhibiting a specific enzyme of the virus called the RNA polymerase. Now, since the SARS-CoV-2 virus is an RNA virus, it has RNA polymerase as well. So this is the enzyme responsible for making viral RNA genome. The remdesivir drug is able to mimic the building blocks of RNA molecule. Once the drug's being incorporated in the RNA synthesis system, it is able to terminate the viral RNA synthesis prematurely, so therefore to inhibit the viral replication.
It's a bit like putting a molecular stick into the spokes of the viral wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
This has been tried in Petri dishes effectively, or in test tubes, so this is sort of known to work at a laboratory scale.
In Petri dish for cultured cells. But this drug has also been used as compassionate drug for several COVID-19 patients here in the US. A few of them have turned out good results, but to apply that to big population, of course, we need to do very careful clinical trials, make sure the drug's side effects, and make sure the drug is truly effective in inhibiting this novel coronavirus.
Other drugs which I've seen mentioned in the literature, there's lopinavir, ritonavir, I think. I don't know if I'm pronouncing them right.
Yes.
These seem to have some effect, but not very dramatic.
Lopinavir and ritonavir is a fixed-dose combination drug for treatment of HIV, actually. So HIV is a RNA virus as well, and these HIV viruses, they use viral proteases. So these drugs, lopinavir and ritonavir, will inhibit the HIV's viral proteases. Now, the proteases are a type of enzyme that can cut protein at specific sites to make the big protein into smaller units. So the smaller protein can function in the cell system, help the virus to replicate.
Can we talk about chloroquine, which is this very odd one because it's got nothing to do with viruses. I thought it was an anti-malarial, but it's been really taken up because President Trump has been talking very loudly about it, and I don't know what the science looks like from where you're standing.
Actually, even before President Trump talked about chloroquine, there are already many evidences, from the scientific community suggest that chloroquine and its derivative hydroxychloroquine may work for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The mechanism that chloroquine may work relies on two facts. One is that this drug blocks the sugar modification on the ACE2 receptor on human cells.
So this is the docking point for the virus?
Yes, the ACE2 receptor is the docking point, exactly, for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. That is expressed on the human cells on the surface. So a lot of human cells, the surface protein will be sugar decorated. If the chloroquine blocks the sugar decoration on the ACE2 receptor, then the ACE2 receptor may no longer be recognized by the virus. In addition to that, chloroquine may also make the cellular environment less acidic. And the less acidic environment is not ideal for many of the viral proteins. This virus protein may not function well in a less acidic environment.
Since Angela and her team drew up their first list, they have dug right into their chemical library for other candidates. They're calling on chemists worldwide to see if any of them have real promise.
We have assembled a data set with more than 50,000 small molecules from our collections that we can offer for free to the scientific community if they are doing research related to COVID-19.
50,000, did you say? Different small molecules?
Different small molecules,
50,000?
yeah. Yes.
And that's not the whole collection, so you found ones which, for some reason, you think could be interesting.
Oh, yes. We have hundreds of millions of collections of substances, including small molecules, biologics. That 50,000 our scientists have filtered through based on the literature search and their indications of possible therapeutic and pharmacological dynamics. So we have put them together into a collection.
Which of these hundreds of thousands, how do you choose which ones you think are a good starting point?
Of course, we will read through the literatures, give the most promising ones first, like the drugs we listed here, right? And we can expand that. Actually, recently we expanded that to about 120-ish small molecules. Some of those are drugs, some of those are drug candidates. We may go through like the anti-RNA virus. First, we go through anti-SARS, anti-MERS viruses. So these two are very similar coronavirus to the current one. The virus is called COVID-19. And then we may go beyond a little bit to anti-RNA virus. And then we may go beyond a little bit more to antivirus.
Angela Cho of the Chemical Abstract Service, curating a library of hundreds of millions of compounds. Science really can help in this crisis. And with that thought, it's time for me, Roland Pease, and producer Julian Siddle to say goodbye. You can find the Science in Action webpage with all our previous programmes on coronavirus at bbcworldservice.com. Until next time, please stay well.
This is the BBC World Service, where we're navigating the world through sound.
I'm Peter White, and I'm navigating cities around the world through sound. This time, I'm in Melbourne.
It's a very good city for my person. It's square. In the city itself, there's beautiful sounds like St Paul's Cathedral and the birds are ringing there.
Taking my tape recorder around this Australian city.
Sounds of the City, Tuesday at 12:30 and 21 GMT. And in 60 minutes, assignment.
Join me, Tim Hewell. Last October, the body of a forest ranger was found in the woods of northern Romania. The sixth forester to be killed in as many years as the battle against illegal logging intensifies. How and why did he die?
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to News Hour from the BBC World Service. I'm James Menendez. Coming up, a health emergency and an economic emergency. 50,000 people around the world have died from the coronavirus. In the US, another 6.5 million have lost their jobs just in the past week. The former head of America's Centers for Disease Control tells us only a global response will end this.
It's World War C, World War Coronavirus, and it really emphasizes that we are all connected.
Also, the radical academic Noam Chomsky tells us how he thinks COVID-19 will change the global economy. Here's that the church in Georgia is helping to spread the virus.
We saw thousands of people receiving this holy drink from the same spoon, including very young children.
And how the pandemic could overwhelm Venezuela's broken hospitals. All of that and more coming up after the news.
Hello, I'm Julie Candler with the BBC News. More than 50,000 people worldwide have now died as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Confirmed cases have also continued to increase, reaching more than 1 million. The United States, where there are more than 220,000 confirmed cases, has now become the centre of the pandemic. Spain had earlier announced one of the highest number of coronavirus deaths in a single day anywhere in the world, 950. Italy's nationwide death toll is now nearly 14,000. There, the main crematorium in Milan has closed its doors until the end of the month to deal with the backlog of coronavirus victims. In France, a warehouse at the main Paris food market complex has been requisitioned as a mortuary. Hugh Schofield reports.
It's a refrigerated warehouse in the Rungis food market just south of the capital that is being taken over. It'll have a capacity to receive up to 1,000 coffins, with the first expected on Friday. Spread out over a vast area near Orly Airport, Rungis is Europe's biggest food market, and the warehouse is separate from most of the commercial activity. In 2003, during the heatwave that killed an estimated 15,000 people in France, a warehouse at Rungis was converted into a temporary morgue in similar fashion.
France has recorded more than 4,000 fatalities. There's been a huge increase in the number of unemployment claims in the United States in the past week because of the impact of the coronavirus outbreak. The latest figure is 6.6 million, more than double last week's. From New York, here's Michelle Fleury.
We're talking about roughly 10 million Americans over a 2-week period that have lost their jobs. It is unprecedented, the magnitude and the speed with which firms here are shedding workers. And that, I think, it sort of helps underscore the catastrophic effect this pandemic is having here on the American economy, but also we're seeing that repeated in other countries around the world. When you look back to the 2008 recession, in America, there were roughly 9 million jobs lost. Now we're talking about 10 million in just 2 weeks.
NATO foreign ministers have asked the alliance's supreme military commander to help members' countries tackle the coronavirus pandemic. The organisation's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said the alliance is already taking steps.
Today, we decided to direct our top commander, General Walters, to coordinate the necessary military support to combat the crisis, to speed up and step up assistance. For instance, by identifying the airlift capacity to ensure that medical supplies are delivered.
Most NATO countries have mobilised elements of their armed forces to combat the pandemic, moving vital medical equipment to countries where it's most needed and bringing in supplies. World News from the BBC. Global oil prices have surged by more than 20% after President Trump said he expected Saudi Arabia and Russia to end a feud that has driven the price of crude oil to 18-year lows. Mr. Trump said he hoped that the two countries would agree to cut supply by at least 10 million barrels. The leaders of centre-right parties from 13 European countries have asked for Hungary's ruling Fidesz party to be expelled from their common group in the European Parliament, the EPP, because of the extraordinary measures it's taken over the coronavirus outbreak. The parties say the decision to let the Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, rule by decree under an emergency that he can extend at will is a clear violation of liberal democracy. Serbia's Prime Minister has apologised for the arrest of a journalist following a government ruling on the reporting of coronavirus stories. Ana Brnabić revoked a decree which stated that only official crisis staff could provide information related to COVID-19. Here's Guy DeLauren.
Ana Brnabić apologised for what she called her stupidity. She said she hadn't adequately explained the ruling that only designated officials should comment on coronavirus. Journalists' organisations had voiced concerns that gathering information independently could result in legal action, and so it proved when police arrested a reporter in northern Serbia who'd written about hospital conditions there. That sparked outrage from rights organisations and prompted the Prime Minister to withdraw the decree. She said the ruling had been supposed to ensure the public received accurate information and was never designed to target government critics.
The International Maritime Organization has asked other UN agencies to support its request for seafarers, port workers and other personnel to be internationally recognised as key workers during the pandemic. The IMO made the plea as UN agency chiefs met to discuss the increasing disruption to travel and trade. BBC News.
Hello and welcome to NewsHour for the BBC World Service. We're coming to you live from London. I'm James Menendez. And coming up over the next hour, we'll be hearing from the former head of America's Centers for Disease Control, from one of Venezuela's leading experts in infectious diseases about the profound vulnerabilities of the health system there. Also from Georgia about how the church is ignoring official advice about basic hygiene. Towards the end of the programme, from Professor Noam Chomsky, the American linguist, philosopher and left-wing activist, who tells us the response to the coronavirus has thrown a bright light on the failures of global capitalism. But before that, we're going to start with the very immediate impact that the pandemic is having on the US economy. Claims for unemployment benefit have doubled in just a week, hitting a record high of 6.6 million Americans. And so, in just 2 weeks, nearly 10 million people have lost their jobs. That's more than during the entire 2008 financial crisis. Well, let's hear from one of them in Ohio about the problem she had just registering.
My name is Terry Zingali. It took me 3 days, literally, day and night, in the middle of the night, to finally get through. I went on the website and it would take me so far and then it would kick me off. Then I called on the telephone and it would kick you off again and say, go to the website. I even tried at 3 o'clock in the morning. I tried at 5 o'clock in the morning. I tried at 7 o'clock in the morning. After 3 days, I still wasn't sure if I was actually all the way through. It wasn't until a day later, I believe, that I found out that I actually got on the site and my information was actually correct.
Aaron Sojourner is a Labour economist at the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management and a former member of the White House Council of Economic Advisors at the end of the Obama administration and into the Trump presidency. How would he characterize these figures?
They're unprecedented. We have statistics going back every week for more than 50 years. And the 3.3 million last week was a breathtaking record. And the one that came out this morning doubled that. So the speed with which the economy has changed is really unprecedented. And the speed with which families are facing big drops in their income is really unprecedented.
Is it more than you expected?
You know, we've been doing modeling based on Google Trends, search activity around the phrase file for unemployment, and we were able to detect this a little bit earlier than the official statistics, and we've been putting out projections, so that's very immediate short-term prediction. The scale of change in our communities is just enormous. 10 million people is a huge number, but it's still only a small share of the total workforce, and we might expect this to continue as long as these sort of broad-scale lockdowns are in place.
Are there particular sectors or states where most people are, or is it pretty evenly spread?
Yeah, it's pretty evenly spread because if you think about it, the industries that are most impacted are those that involve customer service, face-to-face interaction, things like that, restaurants, hospitality especially, and those are spread out very evenly across communities. It's not spread out evenly, obviously across industries, but according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, only about a third of American workers can do their jobs from home. So there's definitely a lot of people who are struggling to keep up with what they can from home, but it's not something that's an option for most people. And it's really hitting, people on the margins of the labor market the hardest. People who are, maybe have less experience, less education, lower wages, who are in those service industries. They're sort of the front lines of this.
Will there be a knock-on effect, given that we're dealing with a pandemic, will there be a knock-on effect for access to healthcare if people have lost their jobs?
Yeah, in the States, that's unfortunately the way it works for a lot of people right now. And there's estimates coming out that, again, many millions of Americans in the last 2 weeks are losing their health insurance because we don't have a national health system and a lot of people are dependent on their employer. There are public health systems that can kick in and pick up some of that, but as the previous person talked about her experience with unemployment benefits, that is a process to get eligible and get benefits, and public systems are just being hit all at once by an overwhelming surge in demand that's just far out of scale with what they're used to dealing with.
If these figures keep going up, is it possible that President Trump was right when he said that the cure mustn't be worse than the disease?
The most important thing is to preserve health and lives. And the first order economic problem is the public health problem. Everything flows from the public health challenge. So we need to throw every productive resource we can at the public health challenge. We need to have started it months ago, and we lost the head start. The president, in my opinion, and by a lot of reporting, blew a lot of early chances to get up to scale with testing and public health strategies by minimizing the risk. But better late than never. We need to get up to speed so that we can know who's sick and who's well and start to move people back to work if it's safe.
Aaron Sojourner of the Carlson School of Management. Well, today's figures are a brutal reminder of the economic devastation that COVID-19 is causing already, and of the need to find ways at some point to start easing the lockdown. But weeks of restrictions look inevitable, especially in hotspots such as New York State, which recorded another 432 deaths in the past 24 hours. And yet here, as elsewhere in the world, testing to find out the true number of infections and to uncover who's already developed antibodies is lagging behind. Tom Frieden is a former head of the Centers for Disease Control in the US throughout the Obama administration, and also a former New York City Health Department commissioner. He gave me his view of the current situation in his home city.
It's horrifying. This, in just a few weeks, is more people than die in a whole year in our city from some of our leading causes of death, such as breast cancer or prostate cancer. And all day long I hear sirens outside my window, and since there's no traffic, virtually all of those sirens are ambulances.
Why do you think New York has been so badly hit? Could it have been anywhere in the US?
I don't think there's a city anywhere in the world that could withstand a full outbreak of COVID-19 disease. And one thing that I realize is how important speed is here. If the governor had waited 2 days more before calling for sheltering in place, cases and deaths would have doubled because they were doubling every 2 days. And by the same token, 2 days earlier would have cut it in half.
You've compared all this to, the fight against the coronavirus to a world war. What do you mean
We're all in this together. Every country is going to have to deal with this with their own strengths and vulnerabilities in their healthcare system, in their society, in their communities, in their governance, in their public health system. It's us against the microbe. It's World War C, World War coronavirus, and it really emphasizes that we are all connected.
If it were a world war, the US would be very well prepared with its vast military power. Why has it proven rather unprepared in some quarters during this crisis?
I've written in US publications about the need for a more structured and organized and focused approach to the response, following the principles of incident management with clear alignment politically and a more prominent place for the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In every prior health emergency in the 75 years the US CDC has existed, it has been front and center in the response, and for various reasons this administration has chosen not to have it so. And I think that's like fighting with one hand tied behind your back.
Why didn't it, for example, have the capacity for mass testing as South Korea has had, for example?
Testing was definitely a stumble on the part of CDC, which had a test kit that didn't perform well and then a delayed response to how to address that. Also, in the US, hospitals developed their own tests, and it took over a month for the Food and Drug Administration to tell them they could do that. That was a lost month. And the private sector, which like large commercial laboratories, had gotten into the game much earlier in other countries. So I think you saw a really delayed response within the US.
And what about just the protective equipment that doctors and nurses so badly need?
What we have predicted for 15 years is that in a bad pandemic, it would be very difficult to keep up with the need for personal protective equipment. And that's why what we've been advocating for is what are called elastomeric half-face piece respirators, N95s, that are a little more difficult to talk with, but they can be disinfected between uses and so could last for the entire duration of a pandemic.
When you were director of the CDC, how much time did you spend thinking about a pandemic and what might be needed to be prepared?
Anytime we're asked what makes us most concerned, it was an influenza pandemic. If you ask anyone in public health, they would say this is the biggest risk. But what we're seeing now is a pandemic that is having the severity of a severe influenza pandemic. Not as bad as 1918, perhaps, but worse than any influenza pandemic that we've had in the last 50, 70 years. And this is something that is front and center of preparations and action. The challenge is that it relies on all of society, and it relies on the ability to scale up safe healthcare in a way that really no city in the world could be able to manage if things get out of hand.
And how optimistic are you that in the coming weeks, just thinking about New York, that the number of deaths, the number of new infections could start to plateau, that we may see some results from what are very harsh social measures to keep people at home?
It's going to get worse before it gets better, but I'm confident that it will get better. At that point, we have to enter into a new phase of the response, what we are referring to as suppression, where there may be individual cases or small clusters, but the healthcare and public health systems need to surge in very rapidly to identify all the cases, to identify all the contacts, to isolate anyone who's potentially infectious, and to quarantine all of the contacts. And by doing that, can tamp this down so it doesn't get out of control again, and there isn't a large second wave, but rather perhaps a small number of clusters, and then people can go back to a new normal. That's the best case scenario. But to get there, we and every country in the world needs to surge up its ability to test, to find cases, to isolate cases, to find contacts, to track contacts, and to prevent cases and clusters from becoming outbreaks and epidemics.
Tom Frieden, former head of the Centers for Disease Control during the Obama administration. And we have contacted the CDC to ask if it'll address some of the criticisms that Tom made in that interview about its response to the COVID-19 pandemic. You're listening to News App. Do stay with us. Much more to come. In a moment, we're going to be hearing from Venezuela. also still to come, the unprecedented physical and psychological challenges facing nurses around the world from COVID-19.
Our efforts are not rewarded with a positive outcome sometimes. Another issue is the interaction with the family member. The contact is mediated by phone, and often we receive calls asking for updates. They never can see their relatives, and the exact response with word how much pain and suffering we can perceive throughout the voices on the other side of the phone.
Well, that coming up in just over 10 minutes' time. A recap of our main headlines from the newsroom this hour. There are now more than 1 million confirmed cases of coronavirus around the world. Just over 50,000 people have died. And as we've been hearing, fresh claims for unemployment benefit in the US have more than doubled in a week as the economic impact of the pandemic hits. This is NewsHour live from the BBC with James Menendez. If wealthy countries with well-developed health systems are struggling to cope with the coronavirus, how will Venezuela, battered by years of economic mismanagement and corruption, fare? Officially, the government of President Nicolas Maduro says there are only 130 confirmed cases of COVID-19. But Venezuela's neighbours, Colombia and Brazil, are reporting much higher figures, and there's scepticism about whether the government is revealing the true picture or indeed whether it knows what that is. Professor Julio Castro is an expert in infectious diseases at the Central University of Venezuela in Caracas. Does he believe the government's numbers?
The numbers that they are doing is the capacity they have in terms of numbers that are the real numbers, but maybe do not show the reality in terms of transmission of the virus in communities.
So there could be many more people infected. Do you expect the number of cases to rise sharply in the coming weeks?
Venezuela should behave in the same way the rest of the countries of the world. So there is no reason why be different here than the other countries.
And if those numbers were to go up sharply, can the hospitals in Venezuela, can they cope with an increase like that?
It depends the amount of the pandemic. It's quite different if you have 1% of the population struck by the virus than you have 40 or 50% of the population struck by the virus. So we wonder what's going to be the main driver for impact in terms of community. We don't have a real picture right now.
And as I understand it, Venezuela only has about 200 intensive care beds with ventilators. I mean, that's nowhere near enough, is it?
The health system in Venezuela is in pretty bad shape. If you have in mind that 60% of the bigger hospitals do not have running water on a daily basis, it can give you idea how bad is the situation in hospitals. It's not just the number of beds or ventilators. Also, it's a matter of basics, commodities in hospital like water, soap, or alcohol to make hand washing.
Yes, the last time I was in Venezuela about 2 years ago, I went to 2 or 3 different hospitals, and there weren't even functioning toilets. As you say, there was not even water for people to wash their hands with.
Yeah, it's the same situation, and better have been getting worse because the basics commodities like water and electricity haven't been stabilized in the last year. We have a power outrage a year and a half ago, and the hospitals still having shortages of medical supplies, but also water supply and electrical power.
The government, of course, will say that the reason for those conditions is because of American sanctions on the country. Is that fair?
I don't think so. The deterioration on the health system has been rising in the last 10 years. If you check for the main outcomes like maternal mortality, child mortality, crude mortality, and epidemics, also we have another 3 epidemics right now. We have diphtheria, we have measles, and we have malaria. And those epidemics last for the last 5 years or so. So it's not absolutely related to the sanctions. Sanctions are a matter of measures in the last 3 years or so.
So what is going to happen then if out of a population of 30 million, maybe half become infected? That's 15 million. And even if 1% of those, only 1%, need hospital treatment, that's what, still 150,000 people. I mean, the hospitals aren't going to be able to treat those people. So what happens then? Do they just die at home?
Well, maybe. I mean, if you need the numbers, the mathematical issue is easy with 200 dead, or for example, even 1,000. It's a matter of a social pandemic, not just the virus. I mean, the virus is the big thing, the point of the crisis. But under that, there is a huge social crisis which is going to get worse.
Do you worry that this could be a catastrophe for Venezuela?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, if you see the impact of the crisis in countries like Spain or Italy, and actually right now in Ecuador, I think that in the best case scenario, we're going to be like they are right now.
That's Julio Castro, professor in the tropical medicine units of the Central University of Venezuela, talking to us from Netizen. Now, in Georgia, the country's powerful Orthodox Church has repeatedly refused to change its ritual of using a shared spoon during Holy Communion, despite the threat of the coronavirus. More than 100 cases of COVID-19 have been reported in the country. A state of emergency has been in place for nearly 2 weeks, banning gatherings of more than 10 people. But as the BBC's Rehan Dimitri reports, those rules don't seem to apply to the church.
Sunday service at Tbilisi's main cathedral. In this religious society, many have turned to God for help in uncertain times. Churchgoers are lining up to receive Holy Communion using a shared spoon to sip the wine, the blood of Christ. For several weeks, Georgian society has been debating whether the church should change its rituals during the pandemic and use disposable spoons. But many priests, including Nikolos Pachashvili, say that faith protects their congregation from infection.
Wine, which transforms into the blood of Christ in this cup from which we take communion, is an antiseptic. The spoon which is purified in this wine is also purified.